All right, now we're getting going here. Oh no, go back. There we go. So we did go over this. I'm just going to go over it again real quickly. Your major cities, and whenever you have a quiz or a test, usually I put something like, which of the following is not a city in North Africa or the Middle East? Which is a city? And then I put three cities that don't really go with it. I don't, I usually do. Y'all taking the quizzes and tests, multiple choice. You have Baghdad, which is located in Iraq, and this is kind of random. It doesn't like follow anything. So Iraq, it's located right here. We're going to talk about Mesopotamia today. Baghdad is located here, right along the Tigris River. All right, this is the birthplace of real civilization in Mesopotamia. You've got Cairo, Egypt. I love Egypt. Egypt is one of the more interesting places. And we'll look at some stuff about Egypt today as well, pyramids and all that good stuff, aliens. Istanbul, Turkey. Jerusalem is located here in what is modern day Israel. Israel is one of those countries that's a little bit different because it is a Jewish country surrounded by Muslim countries. When we look at the three religions, you'll see why they don't get along with each other. One of the main reasons they don't get along with each other is Jerusalem. For years and years, this city has been contested, fought for. During the Crusades, Christians went out and tried to regain control of Jerusalem and of Damascus in some cases. The first time they were successful, but Muslims eventually beat them, and a leader named Saladin beat them in the Second Crusade, and then he signed a truce with them in the Third Crusade. That allowed them to visit the city, but Muslims had taken control over it. For many years, it was in Muslim control until after World War II, we just gave it back to them. Well, I say we, but the Western countries gave it back to Israel. So Jerusalem is always that city that is contested in some kind of way. This is why people in the Middle East who are Muslims hate Israel, because they don't feel like they have fair access to the holy city of Jerusalem, where they believe Muhammad died and ascended to heaven. Istanbul is located right here, crossroad of trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. We'll talk about Mecca, and you'll get to see some great videos on Mecca. I don't know if you'll be here that day, like if it'll be a whatever day, B day, whatever. But when you watch a video, I find Mecca interesting. It's a little bit, if you watch the videos, it's crazy. It's like wild. It's like hundreds of thousands of people at one place. They even had instances where people were trampled because there's just so many people there that visit the city and visit the shrine, the holy shrine called the Kaaba. Tehran is located here in Iran. Dubai or Abu Dhabi, young man next to you, he knew all about Abu Dhabi and how awesome it is. And then you have Rabat in Morocco. So these are your major cities. You have to go all the way over here to North Africa, and then you see Rabat. It does sort of skip some of the, like what I consider, like if you look at Tripoli, all right, and Benghazi, you might have heard those. The Benghazi you've probably heard of because something real bad happened and the Clintons were involved and stuff like that. But Tripoli is where, Ronald Reagan, I think he bombed Libya there back in the day. But when you look at the pictures of these places, it gives you an idea of what they really are all about. Baghdad, it's funny to see Baghdad with that bridge going across what I have to assume is the Tigris River here. It's sort of not, in my opinion, not the most modern place. Because if you look at a place like Dubai here in the United Arab Emirates, look at that. That's about as contemporary architecture as you can get. Really nice buildings, really cool place. I'm gonna try to look up a video of Dubai's mall so you can see what that's like. Um, you know, it really, this is, whenever I think about any of these places, I see, uh, I mean, just look how that looks. Very beautiful. You know, the buildings are sort of cascading off of this whatever water this is right here. Um, Istanbul is like one of the most important cities. This huge dome church that's right here in the middle is called the Hagia Sophia. You learn about that next year. Cairo is old school too. You see the minarets here, and then you see the large buildings. Jerusalem, another domed church right here. You have lots of things there, the Wailing Wall, all the stuff that important to Jews, Christians, and to Muslims. So this is the Kaaba in Mecca. I hate how can I move this? Get out of here. Scared to hit that. Oh no. Mecca is right here, and I know it covers it up, but this is the Kaaba, and all of this is people. See all this white right here? These are people. It's crazy. When you watch it, you see this in action. To me, it's amazing. These are people who are performing the Hajj. They're there. Part of the Islamic faith is to perform the Hajj and go one time in your life to Mecca. There you see Tehran, and Tehran is not real contemporary to me, in my opinion, but you do have that one large, looks like a Sky Needle building out there. And Morocco looks like just a cool place, beautiful place, real close to kind of like, Europe. A lot of Western influence there. I'm not gonna make you do that. I'm gonna make you do that. Major landforms. The one that you always think about in North Africa is the Sahara. It's like the kind of the hardest to traverse or to get across. You also have the Atlas Mountains. Um, the Tigris River is located in Mesopotamia. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Nile River in Egypt. The Mediterranean Sea is probably one of the most important waterways in the world, at least in ancient times as well. Trade, that sort of thing. The Zagros and Taurus Mountains, we'll look at those on the map a little bit later. Black Sea, Euphrates, Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea. This is what Moses parted when he was leading, the Israelites out of slavery. Old school, New Old Testament stuff. Sinai Peninsula, I told you about that, how, I wish I could have went there, but I didn't. Persian Gulf is an important waterway. One thing about Mesopotamia, and in that video, they told you about the Garden of Eden, right? So a lot of people believe the Garden of Eden is in Iraq, right? And that's, the Garden of Eden is like a real place. It's biblical. It's where Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and all the biblical stories of it. But they believe that it's real, and even historians believe that it was real. And a lot of people believe that it was located where the Persian Gulf is now, though. Because you remember the stories of like Noah. What happened with Noah? Yeah, the flooding. So they believe that part of that was, the Garden of Eden was there, and then it was flooded by and covered by water, which is now the modern day Persian Gulf. Then you have the Arabian Peninsula, which is a lot of deserty type area. So now we're going to look a little bit at the history, and this is where we're going to get into some of the stuff. I'm going to go back to the videos after this, and we'll look at that. So important things to know about the history. Mesopotamia is the name given to the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And what that means is simply Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. All right, Mesopotamia is home to Sumer, the world's oldest civilization. Okay, they settled in this area in between two rivers over 5,000 years ago. So if you look down here, it doesn't do a good job of showing you where Sumer is. It's located down here. Ur and Uruk are like city-states that you would find. Sumer is a city-state that you would find over here as well. Even though the climate is hot and dry, the area around the Tigris is known, Tigris and Euphrates is known as the Fertile Crescent. You see this green? This is what we call the Fertile Crescent. It does stretch out towards the Sinai Peninsula and Egypt. This is a real fertile area of land. People look at like the Middle East and go, well, it's all desert. And even Iraq, you kind of go, well, it's a bunch of dirt and sand. But this area is very fertile because you have the two rivers. The rivers would flood and provide, very fertile soil. The river and floodplains were our ideal location for early agriculture. Fertile land between the rivers is an alluvial plain. Flooding deposits silt, which makes the soil very fertile. Most of the population lives in this area, okay, in Iraq. There you see the Zagros Mountains right here. Here's the Taurus Mountains. Most people live here where there's fertile soil and you can grow food. Contributions of Mesopotamia. When you look up the top left, this looks like a pyramid, but it's really not. It's called a ziggurat. It is kind of like a pyramid, but it's not like the pyramids of Egypt. It reminds me of a wedding cake. Hopefully, God forbid, you never have to go through that. But, it's fat on the bottom, and then it has a layer up here, and a layer up here, and a layer up here. Basically, these were temples to the gods. They were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods. This was a temple. You would bring your grain here and drop it off as a tax or tribute to the gods, and a priest would come out. Only priests were allowed in ziggurats. He would come out and take it in there for you. Right here is a clay tablet, and the Sumerian writing is the very first known writing system. It's called cuneiform. And what they would do is they would take like mud, like clay mud, pat it out, use a stylus like you would find a stick, and then they would carve it into a stylus like you find in a Nintendo DS. Y'all remember that little thing? And you had the little stylus on it. That's what they used. And they would write on the clay tablets, put it out in the sun, and it would dry. And it looked like this. This is the very first form of writing. It's wedge-shaped writing. It's not like letters. Letters come along a lot later. We talk about the Phoenician alphabet. So it's not letters. It's really just symbols that represent sounds. Okay? So the first form of writing. Sumerians probably came up with the wheel. You see this guy here with the wheel. Makes work a lot easier. And this is one of the more interesting things here. This is a tablet with all the laws on it. And this is basically the very first law code, which is Hammurabi's code. If you are a person that goes to church or whatever, you've probably heard of this law code. It is written in the Bible several times about the laws of the land being an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Y'all have heard this, right? Eye for an eye. Hammurabi's code was really harsh. So if someone put a guy's eye out, the punishment would be what? That's right. They're going to put that guy's eye out. All right. And I'm making it simple. Of course, it was different for slaves and it was different for, people of no nobility and things like that. But for the most part, this was the first law code. It seemed as kind of harsh. In some cases, you even find that today, the death penalty and stuff like that. In Virginia, they've abolished that. There's no more death penalty. At least that's going to happen. They've eliminated the death penalty in Virginia. And I don't know how you feel about that. Some people are like, they don't, two wrongs don't make a right or whatever. And some people are like, yeah, if you do something bad, that's on you. But it's just interesting because when you have the first law code, how do you know what the laws are? Okay, well, you write them down. You see that up there? That's like you walk by that and go, oh, there's the laws. So when you go to court, it's just like today. Do you know all the laws that exist? Of course, I don't. But when you go to court, if you broken the law, they don't go, well, did you know what the law was? They don't ask you that. They don't care. I didn't know that law was that. Well, you still got to obey the law. It's crazy, right? Hammurabi wrote it down and said, here, the first written law code. We're going to write it down and you got to follow this or you're going to pay the price. All right, next up is the Nile River Valley. The Nile River has provided a source of water, fertile plains, and transportation for thousands of years. Egyptians are the most fascinating people in the world, ancient Egyptians especially. Yearly flooding provided rich and fertile silt along the river's floodplain. This supported farming and led to the development of an advanced civilization. There you see Egypt's floodplain. Behind that, you see one of the ancient wonders of the world, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the other pyramids of Giza there. Great Pyramid of Giza is right here in the middle. I find this extremely fascinating because I don't profess to know how they built it, but I can tell you this: they didn't build it like a lot of people believe it was built in 7 years. I don't believe that. They said that they used slave labor. I don't believe that. Slave labor, is that good labor? No, because slaves don't want to be working. Slaves don't want to be there. Usually they're there under some duress. Remember that slavery in ancient times is not based on race. It was based on if they conquered you, or in the Israelites' case, they had to leave Canaan and wind up, or the Jordan River Valley area, and they moved into Egypt. And the Egyptians are like, now we're going to make you slaves. So if you look here, here's the pyramids. This is King Tut's tomb. This came out of that. Pharaohs were the kings. They were also considered gods. Okay. Their written language is hieroglyphics. It's basically picture-based writing, pictograms. I don't know if I even believe this. Pyramids were built to honor dead pharaohs during the Old Kingdom. When a pharaoh died, he was mummified. Well, they did do that. But I think the pyramids meant more than just tombs, but that's just me. It's just like, there's lots of like writing in the pyramids, right? All right. So you build the pyramid, then you go in and write on the walls. Well, how could they see in there? A lot of people think they used what? Torches, right? Why is that difficult though? Well, what, and this is all science. Mr. Reese can tell you about all this. When you get deeper into the pyramid, you lose the flame because there's not enough what? Oxygen. Fire has a source of oxygen and it burns because of oxygen. So when you get deep in there, you're not going to have a torch. So how did they light up the pyramid so they could write in them? I mean, all these questions, it's just a weird. You know, mummifying a guy. So if they mummified a lot of people back then too. It wasn't just pharaohs; it was regular people towards the end of the New Kingdom. And you know, if you had money, you could be mummified because they believed that it was important. If you were mummified, you know, the thought was you were going to need your body later, so they need to preserve the body. So what they would do is they would take out all the guts, okay, take out the heart and things like that, dry the body out, and then wrap it in, you know, some type of gauze. And it was a big to do, you know. You had special people that could do this. One of the things I also find interesting about the Egyptians, um, you know, slavery, once again, is, you know, it's a terrible thing. Um, but you see in some of the videos, like next year, you'll learn all about this more, but a lot of slaves had power and had influence. Julius Caesar, his slave was a Greek, so he's really smart. He came from Athens, so he's really smart. He advised Julius Caesar, and he was seen almost as a, you know, important person. Um, Cleopatra, her um, her slave, her main slave, had power. She influenced Cleopatra. But one of the things that would happen is when the pharaoh died, a lot of times they were like, "Well, I need my slaves with me." And they'd bury 20 or 30 slaves in there with the pharaoh. You know, that's crazy. So they bury live people, bury them alive with the pharaoh. They found, you know, skeletal remains of other people that were in there with the pharaoh. When Cleopatra killed herself, though, you know, and it's all real speculation, but she kind of told her slave, you know, I'm not going to do anything with bad to you. And she knew she wouldn't be cremated, so or mummified, because Mark Antony had lost the Battle of Actium, and Octavian was going to parade their bodies around Rome after he defeated them. But anyway, but yeah, Pharaoh died, mummified, body put inside the pyramid.
Its sides climb at an angle of slightly less than 52 degrees, rising to a summit of 480 feet. But how did they manage to maneuver 2.5-ton blocks to such an incredible height without the crane or the block and tackle? It was a challenge to the ancient Egyptians and still remains a mystery to modern archaeologists. Egyptologist Mark Lehner has spent 30 years studying the pyramids hands-on.
My approach to the question was, where are the quarries? What kind of a ramp can you get from the quarry to the pyramid in a functional slope?
Lehner and almost all Egyptologists believe that some kind of ramp was used to raise the stone blocks. The type of ramp remains a mystery. Did they approach the pyramid straight on? Zigzag up one side? Or spiral around it?
It's not a problem that's been totally solved, and I've given my suggestions. I've tried to base them in the landscape, but a lot of it is still inference.
Because the ramps were dismantled once the pyramid was complete, only fragments of evidence are available to archaeologists. But it was ramps and sheer muscle power that allowed millions of blocks to reach the summit. Once in position, the builders faced a new task. The blocks had to be fitted together. Surprisingly, in such a precise build, a large proportion of the internal stones were just roughly finished. The gaps between them were filled with rubble and gypsum mortar.
In between the blocks were stuck lots of limestone chippings mixed with huge dollops of mortar, and it's set just like modern concrete.
But every stone that would be visible when the build was completed was placed with amazing precision. In the Great Pyramid, blocks of the burial chamber fit precisely. The sides of these blocks had to be almost perfectly flat to make these astonishing joins. This precision engineering was achieved using the most rudimentary of tools.
Yes, we'll use this rod and string tool in order to find out whether the surface is truly flat. And by using a third rod, which is the same length as the other two rods joined by the string, which is now pulled very taut, we can see if it just slips under. Now, we've got a bit of a high spot there. Now, in ancient times, they would mark that simply by putting some red ochre on, just to remind the workers where to go to, and check along the length of the string.
The ancient mason would use the rods and string to spot imperfections and then mark them with red ochre to show where more work was needed.
Using two further tools, this one being a flint scraper and this one being a sandstone rubber. Now, we can use the marks as a guide to scrape away the high point by itself. And it's obvious that as you scrape, the mark disappears, and with it, of course, the high spot.
This same technique was also used in the final stage of construction. The rough internal blocks were covered with an outer casing of perfectly smooth stone. This was carved from the highest grade limestone and had to be carried across the Nile to the pyramid site. With this polished casing, the pyramid would have shone dazzling white in the Egyptian sun.
But when the pyramids were newly encased in this special limestone, they must have been blinding in the sun like newly fallen snow.
To achieve this, every casing stone was cut to sit perfectly with its neighbors. When complete, the Great Pyramid of Giza was covered with thousands of these facing stones. Sadly, they have long vanished, taken to build the mosques and castles of Cairo. But facing stones can still be seen on the cap of Khafre's pyramid. Even with all the Egyptian skills and tools, building the pyramids was still an incredibly hard task, requiring millions of man-hours to complete. Legend has long suggested that the pyramids were built by armies of slaves. The legends are wrong. Forensic archaeological discoveries are now putting a face on the people who really built the pyramids.
Well, I'm not gonna make you do that.